The mountain air cut through standard-issue fatigues like ice water as dawn broke over Camp Ridgeway. Rifle reports echoed against jagged peaks while Specialist Maya, Chen, struggled to keep pace with soldiers who towered over her 5'2" frame. For 3 grueling weeks, she had been the smallest recruit in the Army's elite close-quarters combat program, her equipment perpetually oversized, her voice lost among deeper ones that commanded attention without effort. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya's boots sank deeper into the mud than anyone else's as she pushed her body through another punishing obstacle course. Colonel Barrett's words from the first day still rang in her ears. Combat isn't about heart, it's about physical dominance. The enemy doesn't care how badly you want to win. The obstacle course stretched before her like a medieval torture device, climbing walls twice her height, mud pits that swallowed her to the chest while others waded through at waist level. Maya forced herself forward, ignoring the familiar burn in her muscles and the even more familiar snickers from the back of the formation. She had learned to tune out the commentary that followed her like a shadow. Look at Chen trying to reach that rope, Private Miller called out, not bothering to lower his voice. Like watching a kindergartner on a high school playground. Maya's fingers stretched upward, brushing against the dangling rope that others had easily grabbed. She jumped, muscles straining, and wrapped her hand around the coarse material, pulling herself upward with a strength that belied her small frame. Back in San Francisco, her grandmother had told her stories of their ancestors who had built railroads across mountains with nothing but determination and hands smaller than Maya's. Small hands find holds where large ones cannot, her grandmother would say while teaching her to fold dumplings with perfect pleats. Small feet find balance where others fall. But here at Camp Ridgeway, in the elite training grounds nestled deep in the Cascade Mountains, those wisdom-filled proverbs seemed as out of place as Maya herself. This was her second attempt at qualifying for the Advanced Infantry Training program. Her first had ended with a medical evaluation and a strongly worded suggestion to consider alternative military specializations, better suited to her physical attributes. "I don't understand it," Captain Reynolds had said during her first rejection, studying her file with a puzzled expression. "Your marksmanship scores are exceptional, your tactical assessments are top tier, but the physical requirements for combat roles exist for a reason. You're simply too small to carry a wounded comrade off the battlefield." Maya had nodded politely, returned to her regular unit, and spent 6 months training in secret. Before dawn and after dusk, she had transformed her body into something that defied its proportions. She couldn't make herself taller, but she could make every inch count. Now, as she cleared the final obstacle ahead of 3 larger soldiers, she caught the eye of Master Sergeant Jackson, the program's lead instructor. His expression remained neutral, but she thought she detected a flicker of surprise before he turned away. "All right, gather up," Jackson called as the last trainee cleared the course. "Tomorrow we begin live-fire exercises in the combat village. Squad assignments will be posted tonight. Rest up, because from here on out, everything gets real." Maya wiped mud from her face and joined the formation, standing at attention despite her exhaustion. This was her moment. The live-fire exercises would determine who continued to advanced infantry and who returned to their units. She had prepared for this moment through countless pre-dawn workouts and late-night study sessions. She knew the combat manual by heart, could disassemble and reassemble every weapon in the armory blindfolded, and had memorized every inch of the training facility's layouts. What she couldn't prepare for was Sergeant Major Victor Mercer. Mercer had arrived at Camp Ridgeway with a reputation that preceded him like thunder before a storm. 20 years of special operations experience, 4 combat tours, and a chest full of decorations that recruits whispered about with reverent awe. He was a living legend who had personally trained over 300 elite combat specialists. Not one of them under 5'8". That evening, as Maya cleaned her rifle in the barracks, the door swung open with enough force to rattle the windows. Sergeant Major Mercer filled the doorframe, his eyes scanning the room until they locked. "Onto Maya." "Specialist Chen," he said, his voice carrying the same gravelly authority that had commanded men through firefights across 3 continents. A word outside. Maya set down her rifle and followed him into the crisp mountain air. Stars punctured the darkness above them, impossibly bright against the black canvas of night. Mercer stood with his back to her for a long moment, hands clasped behind him. "I reviewed your file," he said without turning. "You were rejected from this program 6 months ago." "Yes, Sergeant Major. And yet here you are again." He turned to face her. Persistent. Maya stood at attention, eyes forward. "I believe I can serve effectively in combat roles, Sergeant Major. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Mercer's laugh held no humor. Combat isn't about belief, specialist. It's about capability. My job is to prepare soldiers who can survive the worst day of their lives and still complete the mission. He stepped closer, towering over her. "Do you know what happens when someone who shouldn't be in combat ends up there anyway? People die, Sergeant Major. That's right, not just you. Your team, the civilians you're supposed to protect." His voice dropped lower. "I've carried too many body bags filled with good intentions, Chen. I won't add yours to the count." Maya kept her expression neutral despite the familiar pressure building behind her eyes. She had heard variations of this speech before, from instructors, fellow soldiers, even her own father, a former Army Ranger who had begged her to choose a different path. "I understand, Sergeant Major. Do you?" Mercer studied her face. "Tomorrow's exercise. You'll be with Alpha Squad under my direct command. I'm putting you in the most demanding position because I want to be there personally when you fail. When that happens, you will accept your limitations and request transfer to a role where your skills can actually benefit this army. Am I understood?" "Perfectly, Sergeant Major." As Mercer walked away, Maya remained at attention, waiting until he disappeared into the darkness before allowing her shoulders to relax. Inside the barracks, she found a small white envelope on her bunk. Inside was a form for voluntary withdrawal from the program, already filled out with her details. All it needed was her signature. Maya slipped the form into her pocket and returned to cleaning her rifle. 6 months ago, such a gesture might have broken her resolve. Now it merely reinforced what she already knew. The fight to prove herself wouldn't be won with words or arguments. It would be won in action, in the split-second decisions that separated life from death in combat scenarios. The next morning arrived cold and clear, the combat village shrouded in mist as squads prepared for the live-fire exercise. The training facility had been constructed to mimic an urban environment, with multi-story buildings, narrow alleys, and hidden sniper positions. Maya checked her equipment meticulously. Tactical vest adjusted to fit her smaller frame. Modified grip on her rifle that she had specially requisitioned. Extra magazines secured where she could reach them without looking. Alpha Squad on me, Mercer called, and Maya joined the circle of soldiers. All men, all at least 6 inches taller than her. They listened as Mercer outlined their objective. Clear 4 buildings of hostile forces. Secure a high-value target and extract to the landing zone within 30 minutes. The catch: they would be using live ammunition against automated targets, programmed to return fire with simulation rounds. Specialist Reeves, your point. Wilson and Jackson, you've got the 2nd building. Peterson and Thomas, building 3. Mercer's eyes found Maya. Chen, you're with me on building 4. Building 4 was the hardest, a multi-story structure with complex interior layouts. Blind corners and the highest concentration of hostiles. Maya knew immediately what Mercer was doing. He was placing her in the position most likely to expose her weaknesses under his direct observation. "Remember," Mercer addressed the squad, "in real combat, size matters, strength matters. When bullets start flying, theory and good intentions won't save you. Trust your training and trust each other." His gaze lingered meaningfully on Maya. "Move out." Alpha Squad deployed with practiced precision, each team breaking off toward their assigned objectives as simulation gunfire erupted across the combat village. Maya followed Mercer toward Building 4, moving in the tactical formation she had practiced countless times. As they approached the structure, Mercer held up a closed fist, the signal to halt. Two-story building, 4 rooms per floor, unknown. "Number of hostiles," he said quietly. "Standard, clear and secure. I'll take point, you follow and cover my 6. Stay close and try to keep up." Maya nodded, adjusting her grip on her rifle. This was the moment she had trained for, not just the physical demands, but the mental discipline to perform under pressure, under scrutiny, under the weight of expectations for her to fail. They entered the building in tandem, Mercer leading, with his weapon up and ready. The first room was clear, but as they approached the second, Maya's heightened senses detected something Mercer had missed: a slight disturbance in the dust pattern on the floor, the almost imperceptible sound of movement from above. "Sergeant Major," she whispered urgently, "trap." Mercer paused, giving her a skeptical glance, but before he could respond, an automated target dropped from a concealed panel in the ceiling directly above him. In a real-world scenario, he would have been dead before he could react. Maya's rifle was up and firing in an instant, 3 perfect shots striking the center mass of the target before it completed its descent. The automated system registered the kill, and the target went inert. Mercer stared at the disabled target, then at Maya, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he turned and continued the room-clearing operation, but with a slightly different energy, more cautious, more aware of Maya's position relative to his own. They cleared the first floor methodically, Maya spotting another concealed target that Mercer missed in the third room. As they approached the stairwell to the second floor, gunfire erupted from above, simulation rounds impacting the wall inches. From their position, "Cover," Mercer ordered, moving toward a defensive position. But Maya had already analyzed the angle of fire and the layout of the stairwell. Instead of following Mercer's lead, she dropped to her stomach and slid forward to the base of the stairs, her smaller profile allowing her to remain beneath the line of fire. From this position, she had a clear shot up the stairwell at the automated target that had pinned them down. 3 more perfect shots and the firing stopped. "Chen," Mercer hissed, "I gave you an order to take cover." "With respect, Sergeant Major," Maya replied, her voice steady. "The position was untenable. We would have been pinned down indefinitely." Mercer's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue with the results. They proceeded up the stairs, clearing the second floor room by room. In the final room, they encountered their heaviest resistance. 3 automated targets programmed to fire simultaneously from different positions. In the confined space, Mercer took a simulation round to the shoulder in a real scenario, a debilitating but non-fatal wound. Maya moved without hesitation, placing herself between Mercer and the remaining targets despite the significant height difference. Her smaller stature, which had been deemed a liability, suddenly became an advantage as she used Mercer's larger body as cover, while neutralizing the threats with precision fire. When the final target registered as disabled, silence fell over Building 4. Maya helped Mercer to his feet, the simulation round having triggered his tactical vest to temporarily immobilize his arm to mimic an injury. "You're hit, Sergeant." "Major," she said, already shifting to support his weight despite their size difference, "we need to extract." Mercer looked down at her with an expression that had transformed from skepticism to something approaching reassessment. I outweigh you by at least 80 pounds, Chen. The manual says you can't effectively evacuate a wounded soldier of my size. Maya didn't respond with words. Instead, she secured her rifle, positioned herself under Mercer's good arm, and with a technique she had perfected through months of training, specifically for this scenario, she leveraged his weight using her lower center of gravity. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't by the book, but she began moving them both toward the extraction point with surprising efficiency. The manual was written for average soldiers, she finally said as they navigated the hallway. I had to find my own way. They emerged from Building 4 to find the rest of Alpha Squad already at the extraction point, several members sporting simulation wounds similar to Mercer's. Their expressions registered shock as they watched their imposing sergeant major being effectively evacuated by the smallest member of their team. Building 4 clear, Maya reported as they reached the assembly point. One casualty successfully extracted. Master Sergeant Jackson checked his watch. 28 minutes, 17 seconds. Objective complete. As the exercise concluded and the automated systems reset, Maya helped Mercer to a seated position, where a training medic deactivated the simulation round effects on his tactical vest. Around them, the squad regrouped, comparing notes on their experiences in the different buildings. Maya stood slightly apart, checking her equipment and reloading her magazines with the mechanical precision that had become second nature. Chen, Mercer's voice cut through the ambient noise of the training area. A word. Maya approached and stood at attention, expecting another critique of her performance, another explanation of why her methods were unorthodox and therefore invalid. Instead, Mercer studied her with an intensity that suggested he was seeing her clearly for the first time. You ignored my order to take cover, he said, his voice level. Yes, Sergeant Major. You also saved both our lives. Twice. He rubbed his shoulder where the simulation round had struck. How did you spot that first trap when I missed it? Maya hesitated, then answered honestly. I'm closer to the ground. Sergeant Major, different vantage point means I see different details. The dust pattern was disturbed from below, not from eye level. Something shifted in Mercer's expression, not quite approval, but perhaps the first crack in a wall of certainty. And the evacuation technique? That's not in any field manual I've seen. No, sir. I developed it specifically to compensate for the weight differential. Leverage and momentum rather than raw strength. Mercer nodded slowly. You've been preparing for this specific scenario. For when someone like me would tell you it couldn't be done. Yes, Sergeant Major. The rest of Alpha Squad had gathered nearby, listening to the exchange with unconcealed interest. Specialist Reeves, who had led the point team, stepped forward. She spotted something similar in our pre-deployment training last year, he said. Saved our whole unit from walking into an ambush scenario. We started calling her the Mouse, not because she's small, but because she sees things the rest of us miss. Mercer considered this information, then rose to his feet, towering over Maya once again. But this time, the dynamic had subtly changed. The combat manual isn't wrong, Chen, he said. Size and strength matter in combat. But today you demonstrated something the manual doesn't account for. He paused. Adaptation, innovation, the ability to turn a perceived weakness into a tactical advantage. Maya maintained her professional composure, though her heart raced at what sounded dangerously close to approval from the legendary Sergeant Major. Report to the command center at 0600 tomorrow, Mercer continued. We need to reassess your role in the program. As Alpha Squad dispersed, heading back to the barracks to clean their equipment and prepare for the next day's training, Maya remained behind for a moment, watching the sun begin its descent behind the mountain peaks. She reached into her pocket and removed the voluntary withdrawal form, creasing it between her fingers. 6 months ago, after her first rejection, she had returned home to San Francisco for a brief leave. Her grandmother, nearly 90 and still sharp as the chef's knife she wielded in her tiny kitchen, had listened to Maya's frustrations in silence. Then she had taken Maya's hands in her own wrinkled ones, examining them carefully. "These are good hands," her grandmother had said in Mandarin. "Strong hands, not big but precise. The world tries to tell you what these hands cannot do. Your job is to show the world what they can do instead." Maya folded the withdrawal form into a perfect paper crane, a skill her grandmother had taught her when she was 5, and placed it on a rock near the training course. Then she turned and walked toward the barracks where tomorrow's challenges awaited. That night, as the other trainees slept, Maya sat on her bunk reviewing tactical manuals by flashlight. The combat village exercise had confirmed what she had always suspected, that the standardized approach to warfare had been designed for standardized bodies. Her success would depend on her ability to rewrite those approaches for her unique physiology. She had just closed the manual when her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. The text contained a single line, "Rooftop, 10 minutes." Maya hesitated, then pulled on her boots and jacket. The barracks were quiet as she slipped out into the night air, ascending the maintenance ladder to the flat roof of the building. She half expected to find Mercer waiting for her with some new test or evaluation. Instead, she found Master Sergeant Jackson, the program's head instructor, gazing out at the moonlit mountains. "Good evening, Specialist," Jackson said without turning around. "Master Sergeant," Maya acknowledged, approaching cautiously. "You wanted to see me?" Jackson nodded, still looking outward. "I've been running this program for 7 years. Seen all types come through. Mercer's only been here 3 weeks, but his reputation means his opinion carries significant weight." He finally turned to face her. "He wants you removed from the program." Maya absorbed the blow without visible reaction, though she felt her carefully constructed hopes begin to crumble. "I understand, sir. Do you?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm not sure I do. Today you outperformed every other trainee in the combat village. Your room clearing was textbook perfect, your target acquisition was faster than soldiers with years more experience, and you successfully extracted a wounded comrade twice your size. But Sergeant Major Mercer has 20 years of doing things one way," Jackson interrupted. "And people like that don't change their minds easily." He took a step closer. "Tomorrow morning, he's going to recommend your transfer to a non-combat role. Probably intelligence or logistics, where your attention to detail would be valuable." Maya felt cold that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Thank you for telling me, sir." Jackson's expression softened slightly. "I'm not telling you this so you can prepare for disappointment, Chen. I'm telling you because in 12 hours, you have one final opportunity to change his mind." "How?" The question escaped before Maya could contain it. "Tomorrow's exercise isn't just another training scenario." Jackson's voice dropped lower. "Once a year, we run what we call the Gauntlet, a full-scale combat simulation with the region's best operators playing the opposition force. It's designed to be unwinnable. The point isn't victory, it's how you handle inevitable defeat." Maya processed this information, understanding dawning. "And Mercer doesn't know I'm aware of this." Jackson nodded. "He expects you to fail like everyone else. But unlike everyone else, you have advance notice." He turned back toward the view. "What you do with that information is up to you." "Why are you telling me this?" Maya asked, confusion evident in her voice. Jackson was silent for a long moment before answering. 20 years ago, I was told I didn't have the right temperament for special operations. Too cerebral, not aggressive enough." He glanced back at her. "Someone gave me a chance to prove them wrong. Sometimes the manual needs revising, Specialist." With that, he moved past her toward the ladder. 600, Chun, make it count." Left alone on the rooftop, Maya stared up at the stars, her mind racing. The gauntlet, an unwinnable scenario designed to test a soldier's response to failure. But if she knew it was coming, if she could prepare specifically for those conditions. She spent the next 4 hours in the empty mess hall, using napkins to sketch terrain maps from memory, running through dozens of scenarios in her head. If the objective couldn't be achieved through conventional means, she would need to redefine what victory looked like. By the time dawn broke over Camp Ridgeway, casting long shadows across the training grounds, Maya had formulated a plan that defied every combat doctrine in the manual. It was risky, unorthodox, and precisely because of that, it might just work. At 0600 sharp, she reported to the command center as ordered. Inside, she found Mercer conferring with a group of senior instructors, including Master Sergeant Jackson. They fell silent as she entered and stood at attention. Specialist Chen, Mercer acknowledged, his expression giving nothing away. Today's exercise will determine your future in this program. He gestured to a tactical map displayed on the center table. You'll be operating solo on this one. Maya studied the map, recognizing the remote training area several miles from the main compound. Her pulse quickened as she realized the implications. They were isolating her, setting her up to fail alone without teammates to compensate for her perceived weaknesses. Your objective, Mercer continued, is to infiltrate this compound, retrieve a secured package, and extract to this landing zone within a 1-hour window. He tapped various points on the map. Opposition forces will be substantial and using simulation rounds with full tactical gear. How substantial, Sergeant Major? Maya asked, keeping her voice neutral. A thin smile crossed Mercer's face. A full squadron, specialist. 12 experienced operators who have been instructed to defend that compound at all costs. He straightened up. Extraction helicopter arrives exactly 1 hour after you begin. If you're not at the LZ with the package by then, you fail. Maya absorbed the parameters of the mission, recognizing the gauntlet for what it was, a deliberately impossible scenario designed to teach soldiers to cope with failure. But Jackson had given her one critical advantage: foreknowledge. Any questions, Specialist? Mercer asked, clearly expecting none. Just one, Sergeant Major, Maya replied. Success parameters. Is mission completion the only measure, or will other factors be considered? Mercer exchanged glances with the other instructors. In combat, Specialist Chen, there's only mission success or mission failure. People live or die based on that binary outcome. He leaned forward slightly. But since you ask, casualties inflicted versus sustained will be noted in your evaluation. Maya nodded, processing this additional information. Understood, Sergeant Major. When do I deploy? 30 minutes, Mercer replied. Gear up and report to the transport area. As the briefing concluded, Maya caught Jackson's eye briefly. The Master Sergeant's expression revealed nothing, but she thought she detected the slightest nod of encouragement before he turned away. In the armory, Maya selected her equipment with methodical precision. Standard tactical gear, modified where necessary to fit her smaller frame. An M4 carbine with a customized stock that she had adjusted specifically for her proportions. Extra magazines. And one item that raised eyebrows from the armory sergeant: a small grappling hook with ultralight carbon fiber rope, typically used for mountaineering operations rather than combat scenarios. That's not standard issue for this exercise, Specialist, the armory sergeant noted. No, Maya agreed, securing it to her tactical vest. But it's not prohibited either. 20 minutes later, she was aboard a transport helicopter, soaring over dense forest toward the remote training area. As the landscape rushed beneath them, Maya closed her eyes, visualizing the compound from the tactical maps, mentally walking through each step of her unorthodox plan. The helicopter touched down in a clearing 2 miles from the objective, far enough that the opposition forces wouldn't be alerted to her insertion point. As Maya disembarked, the crew chief gave her a skeptical once-over. "Good luck, Specialist," he said, his tone suggesting he thought she would need more than luck. Extraction in exactly 57 minutes at the designated LZ. Maya nodded her acknowledgement and moved into the tree line as the helicopter lifted off. Alone in the forest, she took a moment to center herself, controlling her breathing the way her grandmother had taught her during meditation sessions in their small apartment above the family restaurant. Then she began to move, not toward the compound as expected, but parallel to it, circling to approach from an unexpected direction. The conventional tactical approach would be to conduct reconnaissance, identify weaknesses in the defensive perimeter, then execute a precision infiltration. That approach assumed time for planning and observation, luxuries she didn't have against a superior force already established in defensive positions. So Maya would change the rules of engagement entirely. She moved through the forest with a speed and silence that would have impressed her ancestors, who had once moved through mountain jungles to evade occupying forces. Her small size, often derided as a weakness, allowed her to slip through dense underbrush that would have forced larger soldiers to create noise and disturbance. Within 15 minutes, she had circled to the north face of the compound, the steepest, most treacherous approach, and therefore likely the least defended. Through her binoculars, she confirmed her suspicion. Just 2 guards patrolling an area they clearly considered naturally secured by the sheer rock face that rose nearly 30 feet from the forest floor to the compound wall. This was where conventional thinking would fail. No soldier could scale that rock face while carrying combat equipment without specialized climbing gear and considerable time. No soldier of average size, that is. Maya removed the grappling hook from her vest, tested the lightweight rope, and began to climb. Her smaller frame meant less weight to pull upward, her fingers finding purchase in crevices that larger hands would slide right past. Within minutes, she had ascended to a position directly below the compound wall, invisible to the guards patrolling above. Using the grappling hook, she secured a line to the top of the wall and pulled herself up in one fluid motion, rolling silently onto the walkway between patrols. She had penetrated the perimeter without firing a single shot. Inside the compound, Maya moved like a shadow, her footsteps virtually silent as she navigated between buildings. From her pre-mission study, she knew the secured package would be in the central structure, likely guarded by the bulk of the opposition force. Direct assault would be suicide. Instead, she needed a diversion. Reaching into her tactical vest, she removed 3 small devices, training flashbangs that she had modified to include a timer delay. She placed them strategically around the compound's secondary buildings, each set to detonate at 30-second intervals. Then she waited, concealed behind a storage container, her breathing controlled and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The first flashbang detonated with a thunderous crack, instantly drawing guards from the central building. The second explosion, 30 seconds later on the opposite side of the compound, created confusion, a potential attack from multiple directions. By the time the third device activated, the opposition forces had divided, teams rushing to secure different sectors of the compound. Maya seized her moment, slipping into the now minimally guarded central building. Inside, she encountered 2 operators who had remained behind. Both were twice her size, armed with automatic weapons, and positioned to cover all conventional entry points. But Maya wasn't using conventional tactics. Instead of engaging directly, she fired a single shot into an overhead light fixture, plunging the room into momentary darkness. In that instant of confusion, she moved not toward the guards, but upward, using her grappling hook to pull herself into the exposed rafters of the building. From this elevated position, she fired 2 precision shots with simulation rounds, striking both guards before they could reorient to her unexpected location. They looked up in shock as their tactical vests registered the hits, temporarily immobilizing them to simulate combat injuries. "What the hell?" one of them muttered as Maya dropped lightly to the floor beside them. She didn't pause to explain, moving quickly to the secure container in the center of the room. The lock required a 4-digit code, information she hadn't been given in the briefing. Another intentional obstacle designed to force failure. Maya studied the keypad briefly, noting the subtle wear patterns on certain buttons. 3 digits showed more wear than the others, -1, 5, and 9. She tried the most logical combination first. 1595. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside the container was a small package and a flash drive, the objective secured. Maya checked her watch. 31 minutes elapsed. 26 minutes to reach the extraction point. Outside, the opposition forces were regrouping, realizing they'd been duped by the diversion. Maya could hear them returning to the central building, their communication growing more urgent as they discovered their disabled comrades. The conventional extraction route would take her back through the compound and out the main gate, directly into the teeth of the regrouping security forces. Instead, Maya returned to her entry point on the north wall, secured her rope, and rappelled down the sheer rock face just as the first operators burst into the building behind her. By the time they reached the wall to look down, she had already disappeared into the dense forest below, package secured and moving rapidly toward the extraction point. The final challenge came 15 minutes later as Maya approached the designated landing zone. Anticipating her route, 6 opposition operators had established an ambush position, covering all conventional approaches to the clearing. A frontal approach would mean certain failure. Even with perfect shooting, she couldn't overcome those odds. Maya studied the situation from concealment, weighing her options. The extraction helicopter would arrive in 11 minutes. The opposition forces were positioned in a standard perimeter around the LZ, expecting her to approach from the denser forest to the south or west. Once again, she would have to rewrite the tactical playbook. Instead of attempting to fight through the ambush, Maya circled to the north, directly toward a fast-moving river that bordered the landing zone. This approach was considered impassable, with steep embankments and rapids that no soldier would attempt to navigate with full gear. But Maya wasn't just any soldier. She entered the water upstream, using her smaller mass to advantage as she navigated through the rapids. The current was fierce, threatening to sweep her away, but she moved with the water rather than against it, using techniques she had learned as a competitive swimmer in high school. The river carried her directly to the landing zone, depositing her on a small sandbar just as the sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance. The opposition forces, still focused on the forest approaches, had left this water route completely unguarded. Maya checked the package, sealed in waterproof material. It had remained secure through the river crossing. The flash drive was similarly protected in a waterproof case. 3 minutes until extraction. She used those final minutes to establish a defensive position on the sandbar, knowing the opposition would spot her once the helicopter began its approach. When they did, the reaction was immediate, all 6 operators shifting to converge on her position. But they had to cross open ground to reach her, and Maya had positioned herself with clear firing lanes in all directions. As they advanced, she engaged with precision fire, her smaller profile presenting a difficult target while she methodically eliminated the approaching threats. By the time the helicopter touched down, Maya had neutralized 4 of the 6 opposition operators. The remaining 2 had taken cover, unable to advance against her surprisingly effective defensive position. She sprinted to the helicopter, package in hand, and climbed aboard just as the pilot began to lift off. Through the open door, she saw the opposition forces emerging from cover, their expressions visible even at a distance, a mixture of disbelief and reluctant respect. The helicopter banked away from the training area, heading back toward Camp Ridgeway. Maya secured herself in a seat, the secured package still clutched in her hands. Her uniform soaked from the river crossing, but her mission undeniably complete. The crew chief gave her an appraising look, then keyed his radio. "Command, this is Extraction 1. Package is secured. Specialist Chen is aboard. Mission complete." I repeat, mission complete. In the command center, the transmission crackled through the speakers, filling the room with a silence that seemed to have physical weight. Mercer stood motionless, staring at the tactical display where Maya's beacon showed her moving away from the training area. The mission objectives unquestionably achieved. "That's impossible," one of the junior instructors muttered. "Nobody completes the gauntlet. That's the whole point." Master Sergeant Jackson studied the after-action data flowing across his tablet. 12 opposition operators, 8 neutralized, 0 friendly casualties, package secured, extraction successful. "Apparently," he said quietly, "somebody forgot to tell Specialist Chen that." Mercer remained silent, processing the implications of what had just occurred. The scenario had been designed specifically to force failure, to teach soldiers how to cope with impossible odds. For 7 years, not one trainee had ever completed the objective, not the strongest, not the fastest, not even the most experienced special operators, until today. Until a 5'2" woman who had been told repeatedly that she was too small for combat had single-handedly taken down an enemy squadron and accomplished what no one else could. As the helicopter approached Camp Ridgeway, Maya allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The mission hadn't been about proving Mercer wrong. It hadn't even been about securing her place in the program. It had been about honoring the wisdom of her grandmother, who had taught her that true strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the smallest hands find holds where others cannot reach. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad where a group of instructors waited, Mercer and Jackson among them. Maya disembarked, package in hand, and approached them with perfect military bearing, despite her soaked uniform and the exhaustion evident in her face. "Mission complete, Sergeant Major," she said, presenting the package to Mercer. "Package secured, extraction successful." Mercer accepted the package, his expression unreadable as he studied the small soldier standing before him, the woman who had just rewritten his understanding of combat capability. "I think," he said finally, "we need to have a conversation about your future in this program, Specialist Chen." The debriefing room fell silent as Maya stood at attention before the evaluation panel. 5 senior officers sat behind a long table, reviewing the mission data on tablets, while occasionally glancing up at the small soldier, who had accomplished what no trainee had done before. Sergeant Major Mercer sat at the center, his expression unreadable as he scrolled through the after-action report. "At 0643, he read aloud, "you scaled a 30-foot rock face without standard climbing equipment, bypassing established security protocols." "Yes, Sergeant Major." "At 0651, you deployed modified training flashbangs as diversionary devices, splitting the opposition force and creating tactical confusion." "Yes, Sergeant Major." "At 0704, you engaged 2 armed operators from an elevated position that no standard tactical manual includes as a viable combat strategy." Maya remained silent, recognizing the statement didn't require confirmation. "And at 0721, Mercer continued, his voice taking on a different quality, you traversed a Class 3 rapid system in full combat gear to approach the extraction zone from what was considered an impassable route." The room remained silent as Mercer set down his tablet and looked directly at Maya for the first time since the debriefing began. "In 27 years of combat operations across 4 continents," he said slowly, "I have never seen anyone approach a tactical problem quite like you did today, Specialist Chen." Maya maintained her professional composure, though her heart raced. Was this praise or prelude to dismissal? "The question before this panel," Mercer continued, "is whether your methods represent a liability or an asset to combat operations." He leaned forward slightly. Make your case, specialist. Maya took a measured breath. This wasn't just about her future, it was about every soldier who didn't fit the conventional mold, who brought different perspectives and capabilities to the battlefield. Sergeant Major, warfare has evolved beyond strength-based paradigms. She began, her voice steady despite the intensity of 5 senior officers' scrutiny. Today's combat environments require adaptability, innovation, and approaches the enemy can't anticipate. My methods aren't a rejection of doctrine, but an evolution of it. She paused, measuring her next words carefully. The objective of any mission is success with minimal casualties. Today I achieved that objective using approaches specifically tailored to my physical attributes. In doing so, I neutralized 2/3 of an opposition force comprised of experienced operators, all while sustaining 0 injuries and completing the mission parameters within the designated time frame. Maya stood a little straighter. My size isn't a liability, Sergeant Major. It's a tactical advantage the enemy isn't prepared for. Mercer exchanged glances with the other panel members, a silent communication passing between them. Then he nodded once. Wait outside, specialist. We'll call you when we've reached a decision. The hallway outside the debriefing room felt suddenly cold as Maya stood at parade rest, waiting for a verdict that would determine her military future. Through the closed door, she could hear the muffled sounds of debate, occasionally punctuated by raised voices. Twice she heard Mercer's distinctive baritone rise above the others, though she couldn't make out his words. 30 minutes stretched into an hour. Other trainees passed through the hallway, some offering curious glances, others deliberately ignoring her. Word of her gauntlet performance had spread through the camp like wildfire, transforming her overnight. From an oddity to be dismissed into something more complicated, a challenge to established thinking. When the door finally opened, Master Sergeant Jackson appeared. They're ready for you, Chen. Maya followed him back into the room, resuming her position at attention before the panel. The atmosphere had changed subtly, the tension had been replaced by something more decisive. Specialist Chen, Mercer began. This panel has reviewed your performance today in context with your entire training record. Your approach to the gauntlet demonstrated exceptional problem-solving, tactical innovation, and combat effectiveness. He paused, and Maya felt her pulse quicken. However, it also represented significant departures from established doctrine. Maya maintained her neutral expression, bracing for the inevitable but that would lead to her dismissal. The purpose of this program, Mercer continued, is to prepare soldiers for the unpredictable realities of modern combat. Adherence to doctrine is important, but so is the ability to adapt when doctrine fails. For the first time since she'd known him, something resembling a smile crossed Mercer's face. Today you exposed gaps in our training approach that warrant serious consideration. He glanced down at his tablet one final time. This panel has decided unanimously that you will continue in the Advanced Infantry Training Program. Furthermore, we are establishing a special Tactical Innovation Unit to explore non-standard approaches to combat scenarios. Upon completion of your training, you will be assigned as the unit's inaugural team leader. Maya blinked, certain she'd misheard. Not only was she being allowed to continue, but she was being given leadership of a new unit. Thank you, Sergeant Major, she managed, her voice steady despite her shock. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't, Mercer replied, his brief moment of warmth already fading back to professional detachment. Dismissed. Outside the debriefing room, Maya took a moment to compose herself, the full weight of what had just occurred washing over her. She had entered Camp Ridgeway as an outsider fighting for basic acceptance. Now she stood on the threshold of pioneering an entirely new approach to tactical operations. As she made her way back to the barracks, she was intercepted by a small group of trainees from her cohort. Specialist Reeves stepped forward, a new respect evident in his bearing. We heard what happened in the gauntlet, he said. Nobody's ever completed that scenario before. Maya nodded, unsure how to respond to this sudden attention. Some of U.S. were talking, Reeves continued, glancing at the others. We'd like to learn that river crossing technique you used. And the elevated firing position. Could be useful in urban environments. Before Maya could answer, another trainee spoke up. And the rock climbing approach. How'd you manage that? With full gear? The realization struck her with unexpected force. These soldiers, many of whom had dismissed her just days earlier, were now looking to her as a source of tactical knowledge. Not despite her differences, but because of them. I can show you, she said simply. Tomorrow, after the morning exercise. We'll start with the river crossing. The next weeks brought a transformation not just in Maya's standing within the program, but in the program itself. What had begun as informal knowledge-sharing sessions with a handful of curious trainees evolved into structured alternative tactics workshops that eventually caught the attention of the training staff. Master Sergeant Jackson approached her. After observing one such session, where Maya was demonstrating how to use smaller tunnels and ventilation shafts for covert, building access spaces most soldiers couldn't navigate, but which offered significant tactical advantages. You've got quite the following, Chen, Jackson noted, watching as a dozen trainees practice the technique on a mock-up structure. Just sharing different approaches, Master Sergeant. Jackson studied her for a moment. Sergeant Major Mercer. Wants to see you. His office 1400 hours. Maya arrived at Mercer's office precisely on time, unsure what to expect. Their interaction since the gauntlet had been limited to standard training exercises, with Mercer maintaining his professional distance. Enter, Mercer called in response to her knock. Inside, she found not just Mercer, but also Colonel Barrett, the base commander. Maya came to attention, suddenly concerned that her informal training sessions had overstepped boundaries. At ease, Specialist, Barrett said, gesturing to a chair. Take a seat. Maya sat, maintaining her perfect posture. Sergeant Major Mercer has been keeping me apprised of your unconventional contributions to the training program, Barrett began, his tone neutral. Initially, I had reservations about the tactical innovation unit he proposed after your gauntlet performance. Maya glanced at Mercer, who remained impassive. However, Barrett continued, the preliminary results have been compelling enough that I've approved an acceleration of the initiative. He slid a folder across the desk toward her. 3 weeks from now, we're conducting a joint exercise with our Canadian allies. Special forces from both countries will participate in a counter-terrorism scenario at their northern training facility. Maya opened the folder to find mission parameters for an operation code named Frozen Shadow, a complex hostage rescue simulation in an Arctic environment. Your tactical innovation unit will participate as an independent element, Barrett explained. This is unprecedented for trainees, but Sergeant Major Mercer has convinced me that your team offers capabilities worth evaluating in a multinational context. Maya processed this information, understanding the immense responsibility being placed on her shoulders. Sir, the Tactical Innovation Unit doesn't formally exist yet. We're still in the training phase. That changes today, Mercer interjected. You'll select 5 soldiers from the current cohort. For the next 3 weeks, you'll prepare specifically for the Frozen Shadow exercise. Master Sergeant Jackson will provide whatever resources you require. Maya closed the folder, her mind already racing through potential team compositions and training requirements. Thank you for this opportunity, sir. We won't let you down. See that you don't, Barrett replied, rising to indicate the meeting was concluded. This isn't just about your future, Specialist. It's about evolving how we approach modern warfare. After Maya left, Barrett turned to Mercer. You're staking a lot on this, Victor. She's still inexperienced, regardless of her gauntlet performance. Mercer nodded, his expression thoughtful. 20 years ago, I dismissed a soldier from Special. Operation Selection, because he didn't match my concept of what a warrior should be. 6 months later, he saved an entire village in Kosovo using methods that weren't in any manual. He looked toward the door where Maya had just exited. I've spent my career learning from that mistake. And you think Chen is that kind of soldier? I think, Mercer said carefully, that warfare changes, and those who cling to outdated parameters get their people killed. Chen doesn't just think differently, she makes everyone around her think differently too. Barrett considered this. 3 weeks isn't much time to prepare for an exercise of this complexity. She won't need 3 weeks, Mercer replied with unexpected confidence. She's been preparing for this her entire life. Maya's first challenge was team selection. The Tactical Innovation Unit needed soldiers who could adapt to unconventional approaches while maintaining core combat effectiveness. After careful consideration, she chose 5 trainees who had demonstrated both exceptional skill and open-mindedness during her informal training sessions. Specialist Reeves, whose marksmanship was unmatched in the cohort. Corporal Singh, whose background in engineering provided creative problem-solving skills. Private First Class Rodriguez, who had grown up navigating the labyrinthine streets of Brooklyn and possessed an intuitive understanding of urban warfare. Specialist Williams, a former Olympic biathlete whose stamina and cold weather expertise would be invaluable in the Arctic environment. And finally, Specialist Jackson, no relation to the Master Sergeant, whose size rivaled Maya's own, making her an ideal partner for the specialized techniques Maya had developed. When she announced her selections, the response was immediate and enthusiastic. These weren't just assignments, they were invitations to be part of something unprecedented. The Frozen Shadow exercise presents unique challenges, Maya explained during their first briefing. Arctic conditions, limited visibility, complex structures, and a technically sophisticated opposition force. Conventional tactics would have. U.S. approached this as a standard hostage extraction perimeter control, entry breach, target acquisition, and extraction. She brought up satellite imagery of the training facility on the main screen. We're going to approach it differently. Very differently. For the next 3 weeks, the Tactical Innovation Unit trained with an intensity that drew attention from across Camp Ridgeway. While other trainees followed standard programs, Maya's team could be found practicing ice wall scaling in the early morning hours, conducting underwater breach exercises in the camp's frigid lake, and running scenarios that had never been included in any training manual. 2 weeks into their preparation, Master Sergeant Jackson observed a particularly unorthodox session where the team was practicing moving in perfect synchronization through narrow passages while blindfolded, communicating only through subtle touch signals. Explain the practical application, Jackson said when they'd completed the exercise. Arctic conditions mean potential whiteouts and technology failures, Maya replied. This technique allows us to navigate environments where visibility and communication are compromised, using physical contact as our guide. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. Creative. But it requires perfect trust between team members. Yes, Master Sergeant. That's why we practice it daily. Jackson studied the team as they reset for another run. Mercer was right about you, Chen. You're not just adapting to limitations, you're finding advantages nobody else sees. The night before deployment to the Canadian training facility, Maya found a small package outside her quarters. Inside was a set of custom-designed tactical gloves, significantly smaller than standard issue, with a note in Sergeant Major Mercer's distinctive handwriting. Proper equipment matters. These should fit. Maya slipped on the gloves, finding them perfectly sized for her hands. The gesture spoke volumes. Mercer wasn't just accepting her presence. He was actively supporting her success. The following morning, the Tactical Innovation Unit boarded a military transport along with other elements participating in the Frozen Shadow exercise. The flight to northern Canada was filled with last-minute preparations and quiet conversations. The team reviewing their unorthodox approach to the coming challenge. As they began their descent, Maya gathered her team for a final briefing. "Remember, we're not just being evaluated on mission success," she said quietly. "We're demonstrating an entirely new approach to tactical operations. Every movement, every decision, every adaptation matters." Specialist Jackson, the smallest member of the team beside Maya herself, grinned. "They won't know what hit them, ma'am." The northern training facility sprawled across a frozen landscape, its structures deliberately designed to mimic various urban and industrial environments. As their transport touched down, Maya could see teams from multiple units preparing for the exercise, their standard issue gear and conventional formations, a stark contrast to her own specialized unit. At the command center, senior officers from both U.S. and Canadian forces gathered for the final exercise briefing. Colonel Barrett nodded to Maya as she entered with her team, but otherwise, they received little acknowledgement from the assembled leadership. "Frozen Shadow begins at 06:00 tomorrow," the Canadian commander explained, highlighting key features of the training environment on a large tactical display. Opposition force consists of 30 experienced operators with simulated hostiles and 8 hostage role players. Teams will be evaluated on mission completion, time to objective, casualties sustained, and collateral damage. Maya studied the layout, noting details that conventional planning might overlook: maintenance tunnels beneath the main structures, narrow passages between buildings that most soldiers would consider unusable, ventilation systems sized for maintenance access. After the briefing, teams dispersed to prepare their specific approaches. The Tactical Innovation Unit found a quiet corner of the facility to conduct their final review. "They're expecting us to fail," Specialist Reeves noted, glancing toward where senior officers were still congregated. "Good," Maya replied with quiet confidence. "Underestimation is our greatest advantage." That evening, as Arctic darkness settled over the training facility, Maya took a solitary walk through the perimeter area still accessible before the exercise. The cold was biting, the kind that found every gap in clothing and turned exposed skin to pain within minutes. She was studying the eastern approach to the main compound when she became aware of a presence behind her. Turning, she found Sergeant Major Mercer, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Reconnaissance specialist?" he asked, joining her at the perimeter fence. "Yes, Sergeant Major." The satellite imagery didn't show the drainage culverts clearly. Mercer nodded, following her gaze to the barely visible openings at the base of the compound wall. "Too small for standard access, but not for everyone," Maya replied. A brief silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of the wind whipping across the frozen landscape. "When I first saw your file," Mercer said finally, "I made a judgment based on decades of experience. I saw your size as a liability in combat environments designed for larger operators." He turned to face her directly. "I was wrong, Chen. Not just about you, but about the fundamental approach we've been taking to warfare." Maya remained silent, sensing there was more. "Tomorrow isn't just about proving your team's capabilities," Mercer continued. "It's about challenging assumptions that have guided military thinking for generations. There are senior officers here who believe exactly what I did 3 weeks ago, that combat effectiveness is directly proportional to physical size and conventional metrics." He gestured toward the training compound. "Show them what I've already seen. Show them that the future of warfare isn't about who can carry the most weight or fit the most established parameters. It's about adaptation, innovation, and approaches. The enemy can't anticipate because they're locked into the same outdated thinking we've been guilty of." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of what Mercer was saying. "We won't let you down, Sergeant Major. I know you won't." For the first time since she'd known him, Mercer smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his normally severe features. "Get some rest, Chen. Tomorrow you rewrite the manual." Dawn broke across the northern training facility with a steel-gray light that did little to warm the bone-chilling cold. Teams gathered at their designated staging areas, running final equipment checks and communication tests before the exercise began. The Tactical Innovation Unit drew curious glances from other participants. Their equipment loadout was noticeably different, lighter, more specialized, with custom modifications that raised eyebrows among conventional operators. At 0600 precisely, the exercise controller's voice crackled over all communication channels. "Frozen Shadow is now active. All teams are cleared to proceed. Simulation rounds are hot. Exercise terminates upon successful extraction of all hostages or at 1200 hours, whichever comes first." While other teams moved out in standard formation toward their designated approach vectors, Maya gathered her unit in a tight circle. "Remember your training," she said quietly. "We move as planned. Communication discipline at all times. Trust the person next to you, and trust the approach we've developed. The opposition is expecting conventional tactics. Give them something they've never seen before." With that, the Tactical Innovation Unit moved out, not toward any of the standard approach routes, but toward a maintenance area at the far northern edge of the compound, a sector deemed too exposed and therefore unlikely to be heavily defended. As they reached the perimeter, Maya signaled for the team to hold position while she conducted a final visual assessment. Through her binoculars, she confirmed what their planning had suggested: just 2 opposition operators patrolling the area. Their attention primarily focused on more likely avenues of approach. "Phase 1, Maya whispered into her communication device. "Jackson, you're with me. The rest of you maintain overwatch and prepare for Phase 2 on my signal." Without waiting for acknowledgement, Maya and Specialist Jackson moved forward, their smaller frames allowing them to utilize cover that would have been insufficient for larger operators. They reached the maintenance building undetected, slipping inside through a narrow ground-level window that most soldiers would have bypassed as unusable. Inside, they quickly located the access point they had identified during planning a utility tunnel leading directly into the main compound, barely large enough for them to navigate in a crawling position. For the next 15 minutes, they moved through absolute darkness, using touch signals to communicate as they'd practiced. They emerged inside the compound perimeter, behind the main defensive positions where the opposition force had concentrated, their strength in anticipation of conventional breach attempts. "Phase 1 complete," Maya whispered into her com. "Proceeding to Phase 2. From their hidden position, Maya and Jackson systematically disabled the perimeter sensors on the northern face of the compound, not by destroying them, which would trigger alerts, but by adjusting their sensitivity settings to create a narrow corridor of approach undetectable to monitoring systems. "Phase 2 clear," Maya confirmed. "Team, proceed to insertion point Charlie." Outside the perimeter, the rest of the Tactical Innovation Unit moved to the designated sector, now able to approach without triggering alarms thanks to Maya and Jackson's preparations. Within minutes, all 6 members of the unit had penetrated the compound perimeter without firing a single simulation round or alerting any opposition forces. In the command center, senior officers monitored the exercise through a combination of surveillance feeds and position tracking. Most attention was focused on the eastern and western approaches, where conventional teams were engaging in firefights with opposition forces, making gradual but costly progress toward the objective. "Sir," a monitoring technician called to the Canadian commander, "I'm showing anomalous readings from the north perimeter. Multiple friendly signatures appearing inside the compound without breach indicators." The commander frowned, moving to examine the display. "Which team?" "Tactical Innovation Unit, sir. They appear to have bypassed the entire outer defense layer without engagement." This caught the attention of Colonel Barrett, who exchanged glances with Sergeant Major Mercer. It appears Specialist Chen has found another way in, Barrett observed, unable to completely hide his surprise. Mercer nodded, a hint of satisfaction visible beneath his professional demeanor. I believe she's just getting started, sir. Inside the compound, Maya's team moved with coordinated precision toward the central structure where intelligence indicated the hostages were being held. While other teams fought through layers of opposition forces, the Tactical Innovation Unit utilized maintenance passages, ventilation systems, and architectural features that conventional tactical approaches overlooked. They encountered their first opposition operator at a junction between buildings. Before the man could raise an alarm, Specialist Reeves neutralized him with a perfect simulation round to the center mass. The operator looked genuinely shocked as his tactical vest registered the hit, indicating he had been eliminated from the exercise without ever seeing who had shot him. 6 opposition operators in the main building, east entrance, Maya noted after a quick reconnaissance through a second-floor window. They're expecting an assault from the front or rear access points. Standard procedure would be to breach. And clear, Corporal Singh observed. Maya shook her head. We're not doing standard procedure. She pointed to a narrow utility ladder leading to the roof. We're going up and then down. The team ascended to the roof, locating a maintenance hatch that provided access to the building's interior. One by one, they descended into the darkness, emerging in a storage area directly above the room where the hostages were being held. Through gaps in the flooring, Maya could see the hostage role players seated in the center of the room, surrounded by opposition operators in defensive positions, all facing outward toward expected breach points. None were looking up. Rodriguez. Flash deployment, Maya whispered. Private Rodriguez removed a specialized device from his pack, a modified flashbang, designed to create momentary disorientation without the risk of injury to hostages. He positioned it carefully, then gave Maya a nod of confirmation. On my mark, Maya said into her com, ensuring the entire team was ready. 3, 2, 1, execute. The flashbang deployed with a burst of light and sound that filled the room below. In the moment of confusion, the Tactical Innovation Unit descended through pre-identified access points, neutralizing all 6 opposition operators before they could reorient to the threat from above. Room secure, Specialist Williams confirmed. After the final operator's vest registered a hit, all hostiles neutralized, hostages intact. Maya moved quickly to the hostages, assessing their condition as her team established a defensive perimeter. We're U.S. Army Tactical Innovation Unit, she explained to the visibly surprised role players. We're here to extract you. Can everyone move under their own power? The lead role player, a Canadian Special Forces operator, nodded with undisguised respect. All mobile. That was unexpected. That's the idea, Maya replied with a small smile. Let's move. Rather than attempting to exit through the heavily contested main approaches, Maya led the team and hostages through the same network of maintenance passages and utility corridors they had used for insertion. They encountered minimal resistance, as most opposition forces remained engaged with conventional teams, still fighting their way toward the objective. At 0734, just 94 minutes into the 6-hour exercise window, Maya's team reached the designated extraction point with all hostages secure and 0 casualties sustained. The exercise controller's voice came over the communication system, his tone unable to disguise his surprise. Command confirms objective complete. All hostages secured. Frozen Shadow exercises terminated. All teams returned to base for debriefing. In the command center, senior officers from both nations stared at the tactical displays in various states of disbelief. What had been designed as a grueling 6-hour exercise had been completed in less than 2 hours by a team led by one of the smallest soldiers in the program. Colonel Barrett turned to Mercer, who was watching the displays with the satisfied expression of a man whose gamble had paid off spectacularly. "I believe, Sergeant Major," Barrett said quietly, "that we may need to revisit some of our tactical manuals." Mercer nodded, his eyes still on the screen showing Maya's team escorting the hostages to the debriefing area. "And our assumptions about who belongs in combat, sir." As the Tactical Innovation Unit entered the command center with their successfully rescued hostages, the room fell silent. Maya led her team to the front, where the exercise controllers waited to begin the debriefing. The Canadian commander studied Maya for a long moment, taking in her small stature and the specialized equipment her team carried. "Specialist Chen," he said finally, "I believe you've just demonstrated why warfare is evolving beyond any of our existing parameters." Maya stood at attention, her voice clear and confident as she delivered her mission report. "Sir, the Tactical Innovation Unit utilized non-standard entry points, architectural features commonly overlooked in tactical planning, and specialized techniques designed for operators of smaller physical dimensions. We neutralized 12 opposition forces and secured all hostages with 0 friendly casualties." She paused, then added, "Size isn't a liability in combat, sir. It's simply a different set of tactical parameters requiring adaptive approaches." The commander nodded slowly, then turned to address the room. "Gentlemen, I believe we've just witnessed the future of special operations. Not in advanced technology or increased firepower, but in the fundamental rethinking of what combat effectiveness truly means." As the debriefing continued, Maya caught Sergeant Major Mercer's eye across the room. The man who had once been her greatest obstacle gave her a single, respectful nod in acknowledgement, not just of her success, but of the transformation in his own thinking. The Tactical Innovation Unit had done more than complete a training exercise. They had challenged generations of military doctrine about who belonged on the battlefield, proving that true combat effectiveness came not from meeting standardized physical metrics, but from the ability to adapt, innovate, and approach warfare from perspectives the enemy could never anticipate. For Maya Chen, the soldier once deemed too small for combat, this was just the beginning. 3 months after the Frozen Shadow exercise, Maya stood at attention in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes. The room's solemn atmosphere amplified by portraits of Medal of Honor recipients lining the walls. Before her stood General Maxwell Warren, commander of Special Operations Command, along with a delegation of military leaders from 4 allied nations. "At ease, Lieutenant Chen," General Warren sighed, acknowledging her recent field promotion with a slight nod. 9 specialized operators for initial penetration and security bypass, Maya confirmed, followed by targeted conventional support once access is secured. "The enemy expects us to come through the front door with overwhelming force. We're proposing to be inside their secure areas before they realize we've arrived." A Delta Force commander shook his head. "The risk concentration is too high. If even one infiltration team fails, the entire operation collapses." "With respect, Commander," Maya countered, "conventional approaches carry their own risks, civilian casualties, operational exposure, and alert mechanisms that could compromise all 3 objectives simultaneously." She paused, measuring her next words carefully. "Traditional doctrine exists for good reason. But sometimes the most effective approach is one the enemy can't anticipate because it defies their understanding of what's physically possible." The planning session extended late into the night, with Maya's unconventional approach facing rigorous questioning from seasoned operators who had spent careers executing missions by established doctrine. By midnight, a compromise had been reached. Maya's specialized teams would conduct the initial infiltrations, with conventional forces positioned for immediate support rather than primary assault. As the meeting concluded, Major Whitfield approached Maya in the corridor outside the briefing room. "Bold approach, Lieutenant," he said, his British accent more pronounced with fatigue, "particularly given the scrutiny this operation will face." "The approach fits the objectives, Major," Maya replied simply. That's all that matters. Whitfield studied her for a moment longer. I've selected Lieutenant Nasir for your Bangkok team. She's our smallest operator, 5'1". Brilliant in urban environments, but consistently overlooked for lead infiltration roles. He smiled slightly. Until now. Maya recognized what Whitfield was really saying. Her approach wasn't just changing tactical doctrine. It was creating opportunities for soldiers whose unique attributes had previously been seen as limitations rather than advantages. I look forward to working with her, Maya said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose beyond the mission itself. The next 3 weeks were consumed with intensive preparation. Maya personally selected each operator for the infiltration teams, focusing not on conventional metrics like size and strength, but on specialized capabilities that matched the unique requirements of each target. For Bangkok, she chose Specialist Jackson from her original team, along with a Marine Force recon operator who had been a competitive swimmer, and the British SAS officer Whitfield had recommended. For Tripoli, Corporal Singh led a team including an Air Force pararescue specialist with extensive subterranean experience and an Australian SASR operator who had worked in mining before joining the military. And for Bucharest, the most challenging target Maya would lead personally, alongside Sergeant Rivera from her Tactical Innovation Unit and a Canadian JTF-2 operator with exceptional climbing skills. Each team trained relentlessly on mock-ups of their target environments, developing specialized techniques for the unique challenges they would face. Maya divided her time between all 3 teams, refining approaches and ensuring seamless coordination between the infiltration units and their conventional support elements. 2 days before deployment, she received an unexpected visitor at the secure training facility in Virginia, where final preparations were underway. General Warren arrived without announcement, requesting a private meeting in the small office Maya had been using as an operational headquarters. "How's your grandmother, Lieutenant?" Warren asked once they were alone, catching Maya completely off guard with the personal question. "Sir?" She replied, momentarily confused. "Your grandmother," Warren repeated. "The one who taught you that small hands find holds where large ones cannot. She's still in San Francisco?" Maya blinked in surprise. "Yes, sir. But I don't recall mentioning that phrase in any official context." Warren smiled slightly. "You didn't. I heard it from your father 22 years ago when we served together in the 75th Ranger Regiment." The revelation hit Maya with unexpected force. "You knew my father?" "Captain David Chen was one of the finest officers I ever served with," Warren confirmed, "and one of the most innovative tactical thinkers in special operations." His expression softened slightly. He talked about his daughter constantly, the little girl who could solve puzzle boxes that stumped grown men, who found pathways through obstacle courses that adults couldn't see. Maya sat very still, absorbing this new connection to the father she had lost to a training accident when she was 12. She had followed him into the military carrying his memory and his quiet encouragement of her unconventional thinking, never knowing his professional legacy extended to the highest levels of command. He would be extraordinarily proud of what you're doing, Lieutenant, Warren continued. Not just the missions you've completed, but the fundamental change you're creating in how we approach warfare. Thank you, sir, Maya managed, fighting to maintain her professional composure despite the emotional weight of this unexpected connection. Warren stood, preparing to leave. I didn't come here to reminisce, though. I came to tell you that I've authorized deployment of an additional QRF for each target location. Your approach remains primary, but I want overwhelming support capability if needed. Maya nodded her understanding. A prudent addition, sir. At the door, Warren paused. Your father used to say that the future of warfare wouldn't be determined by who had the biggest gun, but by who could reach places others couldn't access. He looked back at her with what appeared to be both professional and personal pride. He was right. And you're proving it. After Warren left, Maya remained in the quiet office, processing this new dimension to her professional journey. She had entered the military carrying her father's memory as personal inspiration. Now she discovered she was also carrying forward his professional vision, a continuation of tactical innovation that spanned generations. The revelation added new layers of meaning to Operation Phantom Thread. This wasn't just about proving her methods effective or validating her place in combat operations. It was about fulfilling a legacy of innovation that challenged conventional thinking about warfare itself. The night before deployment, Maya gathered all 3 infiltration teams for a final briefing. 9 operators from 4 nations, each selected for specialized capabilities rather than adherence to traditional combat metrics. They represented a fundamental shift in special operations philosophy, not just in who conducted the missions, but in how they approached the very concept of tactical advantage. Tomorrow, Maya told them, we execute an operation that challenges conventional doctrine at its core. Many are watching to see if our approach succeeds or fails. But remember this, we're not trying to replace traditional methodologies. We're expanding the tactical possibilities available to commanders. She looked at each operator in turn, seeing not the differences in their physical dimensions or backgrounds, but the shared commitment to redefining what was possible in modern warfare. The enemy expects us to come through the front door because that's what decades of doctrine has taught them to anticipate. Their defenses, their contingencies, their entire security approach is built around that expectation. Maya allowed herself a small smile. But we're not coming through the front door. We're coming through passages they believe are physically impossible to navigate. We're coming through access points they've dismissed as irrelevant. We're coming through their assumptions about what soldiers can and cannot do. The teams deployed at 03:00 the following morning, transported by specialized aircraft to staging areas near their target locations. Final communications checks confirmed all teams were in position and prepared to execute their infiltration simultaneously. At precisely 07:00 local time in each theater. In Bangkok, Maya's first team navigated the city's complex drainage system, moving through tunnels barely large enough for conventional operators to access. Using specialized breathing equipment and communication systems designed for confined spaces, they reached the access point beneath the financial hub without detection. In Tripoli, the second team descended into the ancient cistern network that predated the modern city, following pathways mapped through historical archives and modern scanning technology. They moved silently through spaces that hadn't seen human passage in decades, bypassing sophisticated perimeter security systems designed to detect conventional infiltration. And in Bucharest, Maya led her team through the most challenging approach, a vertical ventilation shaft that required specialized climbing techniques and equipment modifications she had developed specifically for this operation. As they ascended through the narrow passage, Maya thought of her grandmother's hands showing her how to tie intricate knots, of her father's legacy of tactical innovation, of all the time she had been told her size made her unsuitable for combat operations. At precisely 07:00 in each location, the infiltration teams breached their target's secure areas simultaneously. In Bangkok, security systems were disabled from within, allowing conventional forces to secure the financial hub without casualties. In Tripoli, the training compound was isolated and contained before the occupants realized they'd been compromised. And in Bucharest, Maya's team neutralized the command center's communication capabilities in the critical first minutes, preventing any alert to the other facilities. When conventional forces entered the building 30 minutes later, they found the command staff already secured and vital intelligence preserved. Operation Phantom Thread was completed with 0 friendly casualties, minimal collateral damage, and 100% objective success, a standard almost unheard of in complex multi-theater Counter-terrorism operations. In the secure communications room of the Bucharest facility, Maya received the confirmation transmissions from the other teams, as conventional forces completed the secure phase of the operation. Major Whitfield's voice came through from Bangkok. Objective Silk secure. Lieutenant Nasser's infiltration approach was flawless. From Tripoli, Corporal Singh reported, Objective Needle secure. Conventional support encountered zero resistance after our bypass of primary security systems. Maya acknowledged both transmissions, then made her final report to command. JSOC actual. This is thread leader. All objectives secure. Infiltration methodology successful at all 3 targets. Awaiting extraction orders. General Warren's voice replied personally. Outstanding work, thread leader. Complete intelligence gathering and prepare for extraction at 1100 hours. As Maya's team completed their final tasks in the secured facility, Sergeant Rivera approached her with an intercepted document recovered from the command center's main computer. Lieutenant, you should see this, Rivera said, her expression indicating the significance of the find. Maya reviewed the document, a security assessment conducted by the terrorist network just 3 months earlier. The final paragraph stood out with painful clarity. Western military doctrine remains predictable in approach vectors and methodologies. Our security protocols are designed to counter standard special operations tactics, with particular emphasis on conventional entry points and assault parameters. No alternative approach vectors have been identified as viable concerns. Maya handed the document to the intelligence officer documenting their findings. It was perhaps the most definitive validation possible of her tactical approach. Enemy had been so certain of conventional military limitations that they had left critical vulnerabilities completely unaddressed. 6 hours later, Maya's team was extracted by helicopter, joining a transport aircraft that would return them to Joint Base Andrews. As they flew over the European countryside, Maya found a moment of quiet reflection amid the post-operation activity. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from being the smallest recruit at Camp Ridgeway to leading an operation that had rewritten special operations doctrine. She thought about all the times she had been told what she couldn't do, all the assumptions about her capabilities based solely on her physical dimensions. Most of all, she thought about how limitations often existed primarily in perception rather than reality, and how challenging those perceptions could open possibilities that transformed not just individual careers, but entire approaches to complex problems. Sergeant Rivera settled into the seat beside her, interrupting her thoughts. Word from command is that all intelligence objectives were achieved. The network has been completely dismantled. Maya nodded her acknowledgement, then noticed something in Rivera's expression. There's more? General Warren has authorized preliminary planning for expanded tactical innovation units across all service branches. Rivera confirmed, unable to suppress a smile. Specialized selection protocols, training methodologies, equipment modifications, all based on our model. The significance of this development wasn't lost on Maya. What had begun as her personal fight to prove she belonged in combat had evolved into a fundamental shift in how the military approached special operations, creating pathways for countless soldiers whose unique attributes had previously been seen as disqualifying rather than potentially advantageous. There's something else, Rivera added, handing Maya a secure tablet with a message from Sergeant Major Mercer. Thought you'd want to see this right away. The message was brief but carried enormous weight. Lieutenant Chen, your father would be proud. I certainly am. Selection for the first expanded tactical innovation training cycle begins next month. 28 candidates already identified, all previously rejected from special operations based on physical parameters. You've changed everything. Mercer, as their aircraft began its approach to American airspace, Maya Chen, the soldier once deemed too small for combat, understood. that she had accomplished something far more significant than a successful mission. She had proven that true combat effectiveness wasn't measured by fitting standardized parameters, but by leveraging unique attributes to accomplish what others believed impossible. In doing so, she hadn't just secured her own place in combat operations, she had opened the door for countless others to follow, creating a legacy of innovation that would reshape special operations for generations to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.